Three certified technicians, one factory-trained specialist, stood in front of a combine worth more than most houses in that county, and none of them could fix it. The machine sat dead in the middle of a wheat field, engine silent, harvest unfinished. And out on the horizon, a storm was building. Not a light rain, not something you could work around, a full system, wind, heavy rain, the kind that could flatten a field overnight and turn a full season of work into nothing. They had hours, maybe less. The farm belonged to Mark Ellison, second-generation farmer, 75 acres of winter wheat, almost ready to come off the field. He had timed it perfectly, moisture right, heads full, grain ready. All he needed was for the machine to run. But it didn't. It had shut down mid-pass, no warning, no gradual failure, just stopped. And now it wouldn't restart. Mark had called everyone he could think of. First, the local mechanic, then another, then the dealership. By the time the specialist arrived, they had already spent nearly a full day trying everything they knew. Fuel system, electrical lines, sensors, panels opened, tools scattered, voices rising. Nothing worked. The specialist, clean shirt, company logo stitched over the pocket, stood back from the machine, arms crossed, looking at it like it had personally insulted him. "It shouldn't be doing this," he said. "It just doesn't make sense." That was the worst kind of problem. Not broken in an obvious way. Broken in a way that didn't follow the rules. The sky kept getting darker. Wind moved through the wheat in slow waves, like something passing beneath the surface. Mark checked the horizon again, then checked his watch, then looked back at the machine. Every minute it sat there, the risk grew. Every minute closer to losing everything. That's when the old man showed up. No one saw where he came from. He wasn't part of the crew, didn't arrive in a service truck, didn't carry a toolbox, just a worn jacket, dust on his boots, and the kind of slow walk that didn't match the urgency of the moment. He stopped a few steps away from the combine and just looked at it. Didn't ask questions, didn't introduce himself, just watched. One of the technicians noticed him first. "Can we help you?" The tone wasn't rude, but it wasn't welcoming either. More like, "Why are you here?" The old man didn't answer right away. He took a few steps closer, eyes moving across the machine, slowly, carefully. 30 seconds, maybe less. Then he nodded, almost to himself. "I know what's wrong." Silence. Then laughter. Not loud at first, just a quick reaction, shared between men who had already spent hours on the same problem. One of them shook his head. "We've been at this all day," he said, "and you figured it out in 30 seconds?" The old man didn't react, didn't defend himself, didn't explain. He just looked at the machine again, then back at them. "Give me a minute," he said. They didn't take him seriously, not really, but they didn't stop him either. Maybe because they were out of options. Maybe because it didn't matter anymore. Or maybe because deep down they wanted to see what he would do. What happened next was the moment everything changed. He didn't open the engine first. He didn't reach for tools. He didn't ask what they had already tried. That alone was enough to make them dismiss him. Because every man standing there had approached the problem the same way. Start with the obvious, work outward, follow procedure. The old man did the opposite. He stepped around the machine, slow, deliberate, like he wasn't fixing it, but remembering it. He ran his hand along the side panel, not testing it, just feeling it. He crouched slightly, looked beneath the frame, then stood again. No hurry, no wasted motion. One of the technicians leaned toward the other. "What's he doing?" The other shrugged. "Guessing." That word hung there, dismissive, final. But the old man wasn't guessing. He was reading. Not the manual, not a diagram, the machine itself. The way it sat, the way it stopped, the way the failure had happened, all at once, with no warning. He stepped toward the feeder housing, the section where crop material first entered the machine. That was where the load changed, where pressure built, where small problems turned into big ones. He leaned in closer, not looking for something broken, looking for something slightly out of place, something small enough that no one had noticed it yet. Behind him, the specialist checked his watch. The sky was darker now, wind picking up. "We don't have time for this," he said. "We need to pull it apart again." But no one moved, because something about the old man's focus made them wait. Then he stopped, just stopped, his hand resting against a small section near the intake. Not a major component, not something listed as critical, the kind of part you only noticed if you knew exactly where to look. He pressed it lightly, watched how it responded, then nodded again. "That's it," he said. No hesitation, no uncertainty. One of the technicians let out a short laugh. "That's what?" The old man didn't explain. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small object. Not a specialized tool, not anything designed for the machine, just a simple, cheap piece of hardware. The kind of thing you could buy at any local supply store, less than $15. He held it up for a moment, then moved back toward the combine. The specialist stepped forward. "Wait," he said. "You're not seriously—" The old man didn't stop, didn't argue, didn't ask permission. He made a single adjustment, precise, deliberate, not forceful, just enough. Then he stepped back. "Try it," he said. No one moved at first, because they had already tried everything, because they had already failed, and because they didn't believe him. But there was nothing left to lose. The operator climbed into the cab, turned the key. The engine turned once, twice. Then it came to life, clean, stable, running like nothing had ever been wrong. No hesitation, no struggle, just working. The sound filled the field, and for a moment no one spoke, because the problem was gone. For a few seconds, no one moved. The engine kept running, steady, smooth, like it had never failed at all. The sound alone was enough to change the air in the field. The same men who had been pulling panels apart, checking wires, arguing over possibilities, now stood still, watching the machine as if it might stop again. But it didn't. It kept running. One of the technicians stepped closer, looked at the section the old man had touched, then looked back at the others. What did he do? No one answered, because none of them had seen it clearly enough to explain it. And the man who had done it was already stepping away. Mark Ellison climbed down from the cab, faster than he had climbed up. He walked straight toward the old man. "Wait," he said. "Don't go." The old man stopped, turned slightly. "What was it?" Mark asked. The old man looked back at the machine, then at Mark. "Not broken," he said. "Just out of place." That didn't sound like an answer. At least, not the kind they were used to. The specialist stepped forward. "What exactly did you adjust?" Now there was something sharper in his voice, not mocking, but not comfortable either, because authority had just shifted. The old man didn't rush to explain. He pointed to a small section near the feeder housing. "A sensor mount," he said, "wasn't sitting right." The specialist frowned. "That wouldn't stop the whole system." The old man nodded. "It will, if it tells the machine something's wrong, when it isn't." That landed differently. Not as opinion, as fact. Modern machines didn't just run on mechanics. They ran on signals, sensors, feedback loops. One wrong reading, and the entire system shut itself down. The technicians knew that. Of course they did. But they had been looking for failure, not miscommunication. The old man had looked at it differently, not as a system of parts, but as a system of behavior. How it stopped, when it stopped, what it did, right before it stopped. That was where the answer had been. Not in the complexity, in the detail. The specialist stepped closer to the machine, looked again at the mount. Now he saw it. A slight shift, barely visible. Enough to trigger a fault. Enough to shut everything down. He exhaled slowly. Not frustration this time. Recognition. "You've seen this before," he said. The old man nodded once. "Not this exact machine," he said, "but the same kind of problem." That was the difference. The technicians had training, procedures, systems to follow. The specialist had certification, factory knowledge. But the old man had experience. Not with manuals, with patterns. Years of watching machines fail and understanding why. Not just how they broke, but how they behaved right before they did. Mark looked at the machine again. Still running, still ready. The storm hadn't arrived yet, but it was close. He turned back to the old man. "How much do I owe you?" The old man shook his head slightly. "Not much," he said. Then he named a number. Less than $15. For a fix that had just saved an entire harvest. No one laughed this time. No one made a comment. Because they all understood something now that they hadn't understood before. The man they had dismissed was the only one who had actually seen the problem. They didn't celebrate. Not right away. Because there was still work to do. The machine was running, but the storm was closer now. Wind stronger, clouds lower. The kind of sky that doesn't give warnings twice. Mark climbed back into the cab. No hesitation this time. He pushed the throttle forward and drove straight into the standing wheat. The header cut clean, grain flowed. The combine moved the way it was supposed to, steady, efficient, alive again. On the ground, the others stepped back, watching it work, watching what almost hadn't happened. No one spoke about the old man, not yet, because what had just happened hadn't settled in. But something had changed. You could feel it. Not in the machine, in the people standing around it. The same men who had laughed were now quiet, not embarrassed, something deeper than that, careful. The specialist stayed where he was, arms no longer crossed, eyes still on the machine, but his focus had shifted. He wasn't watching the combine anymore. He was replaying what had just happened. 30 seconds, one adjustment, no tools, no diagnostics. That didn't fit the system he had been trained in, and that's what bothered him. He walked back to the spot where the old man had been standing, looked down, then back at the machine, trying to understand, not what had been done, but how it had been seen. Because the fix itself was simple. Anyone could have done it if they had known where to look. The difference was knowing, and that wasn't in the manual. Mark drove the combine until the first drops of rain hit the windshield. Not light drops, heavy, sharp. The field changed color as the rain came in. Dust turned to dark soil. Air turned thick. The kind of rain that ends harvest, whether you're ready or not. But by then, it didn't matter. Most of the field was already cut, saved. He shut the machine down near the edge of the field, engine cooling, rain hitting the metal in steady rhythm. And for the first time since it had broken, he allowed himself to breathe. He climbed down slowly, looked back across the field, then toward the road. The old man was gone. No truck, no sign of where he had come from, or where he had gone. Just the result, still standing in front of him. The technicians packed up their tools in silence. No jokes, no explanations, nothing to add. The specialist lingered a little longer, then finally spoke. "He didn't guess," he said. No one answered, because they all knew that already. That was the moment the story shifted. Not when the machine started, but when they understood why it had. It wasn't luck. It wasn't chance. It was something else. Something they didn't have. And now, they couldn't ignore it anymore. The storm passed that night. Hard rain, strong wind, the kind that would have flattened the field if it had still been standing. But it wasn't. Most of it had already been harvested, saved, because the machine had come back to life just in time. By morning, the story had already started to spread, not through announcements, not through reports, through conversation. At the co-op, at the diner, across the county, the same question kept coming up. Who fixed it? Mark told it the same way every time. An old man, didn't know his name, didn't ask, just showed up, looked at the machine, and fixed it. Some didn't believe it, said there had to be more to it, said maybe the technicians had already found the problem and the timing just looked that way. Others didn't argue, because they had seen something like it before. Not the exact situation, but the pattern. Experience beating expertise. Quiet knowledge beating formal training. The specialist didn't tell the story right away. He went back to the dealership, back to the service reports, the manuals, the procedures. And for the first time in years, he read them differently. Not as instructions, but as limitations. What they covered and what they didn't. Because the problem they had faced wasn't complicated. It was specific. And that was why they missed it. They were trained to look for patterns, but only the ones they had been taught. The old man wasn't limited by that. He had seen enough machines fail in enough different ways to recognize something that didn't fit. Weeks later, the specialist drove back out to the farm, not for a repair, just to ask a question. Who was he? Mark shook his head. Don't know. Never seen him before. Hasn't come back. The specialist stood there for a moment, then nodded slowly, because the answer wasn't really about the man. It was about what he represented, a kind of knowledge that doesn't come from training, doesn't come from certification, and doesn't show up until it's needed. Mark kept farming. The combine ran the rest of the season without another issue. Harvest finished, grain sold. The year saved him. Not because of the machine, but because of what he had seen. 4 men with all the right credentials, missing something simple, and 1 man with none of it, seeing exactly what mattered. That difference doesn't show up in titles or uniforms or the tools you carry. It shows up in how you look at a problem, what you notice, what you ignore, and how long you've been paying attention. Years later, when Mark told the story again, he always left one part out. He never mentioned the laughter, never mentioned how quickly they had dismissed the old man, because that part wasn't the point anymore. The point was this: sometimes the difference between failure and saving everything comes down to one person who sees what everyone else misses. And the only reason they see it is because they've been looking for a very long time.